KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. If you think of Baroque music, it might bring to mind ornate-sounding pieces by composers like Bach, Vivaldi, or Handel. But a pair of concerts in Denver this weekend will offer listeners a different flavor of Baroque music. This is a Baroque piece by Portuguese-Mexican composer Gaspar Fernandes. You can hear rhythms, percussion, and guitars that you probably wouldn't find in a Bach piece. That music is one of several pieces by Latin American composers on the program for this weekend's concerts by the Baroque Chamber Orchestra of Colorado. Zoe Weiss is a musicologist at the University of Denver and a musician who's leading the concerts. She talked with us about why she's eager to play this music in Colorado and why she finds the music itself so thrilling.
It captures a really vibrant musical culture that was different than the culture in Spain or other countries in Europe. And I think it has its sort of unique flavor that's really fun. And I love being able to taste all those different flavors of music.
It's so interesting because you can hear the more formal European musical influences, but then also these indigenous rhythms and percussion. What do you hear as a performer and a musicologist when you listen to this music? What jumps out at you?
Well, as you mentioned, I do hear that hybridization, right? You hear the influences of formal training of musicians that came from Spain, but also musicians born in New Spain who were trained in the European traditions. You do hear some of these influences of indigenous music, of dances, of language, indigenous languages. And you also hear African influences from people who were brought over, enslaved people from Africa who were there as well. And so this meeting of many different cultures and the musical hybridization that took place.
How did you feel when you first encountered some of these pieces?
You know, I've always felt that Baroque music is more akin to popular music than classical music in some ways.
Interesting.
But when I encountered Latin American Baroque music, first time I thought, oh, this is really, really fun. It's like, you know, playing popular music. You have percussion, you have these great riffs that repeat with these variations. There's opportunities for your own ornamentation to bring in your own voice and things that you want to add. And it's the most fun.
Now, Zoe, you play a Baroque instrument. In addition to studying this music, you are a viola da gamba player. That's a relative of the cello, as I understand it, with 6 strings and frets like a guitar. What made you want to play the viola da gamba?
You know, for me, it was the sound. So it's actually a separate family from the violin, viola, cello family, and it comes in different sizes. And I'll be playing the little itty-bitty violin size version in this concert. The sound of the viola da gamba is just different than anything else. It has this sort of resonance and slightly reedy or nasal sound to it, as well as this beautiful repertoire of music. It can play chords like a guitar because it's tuned like a guitar, but it's got a bow like a cello, so you can make all sorts of different sounds, and it's really fun to play.
I want to talk about an artist named Juana Ines de la Cruz, who is the focus of this weekend's concerts. She's a 17th century poet from Mexico. Her writing survived, but the music that she wrote to accompany it did not. So this weekend you'll perform pieces other composers wrote for her texts. Let's hear one of those. Sor Juana, as she's better known, was a remarkable artist. She had many talents and was very influential. Talk about what made her so influential.
Well, she was a child prodigy, taught herself Latin and Nahuatl, the Aztec language, as a child. She was really someone that the world wasn't prepared for, and particularly not her world as a woman. She found a place for herself in a convent where she would hold salons like noble women did. People would come in and play music and have intellectual debates at her convent.
Wow.
She was really quite remarkable and very prolific writer, although we've lost quite a lot of her writings as well. Her musical education was very, very high level. And we have a lot of indications in her writing that music was an important concern for her and something she was involved with.
That's incredible. That really must speak to her influence, the fact that her texts were disseminated and made it all over. She was also a bit controversial. Could you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, she ran into trouble. She had very strong feelings about the education of women and how important that was, and their intellectual freedom. And so she ended up getting sort of censured by the church on several occasions. And at the very end of her life, tragically, her entire library, which was apparently enormous and included many musical instruments as well, was basically confiscated and she was forced to do penance. But the replies that she wrote in defense of women's education and the place of women in the intellectual world are just as important and fiery today as they were in 17th century Mexico.
So, Zoe, what excites you about sharing this music with the community in Denver and Colorado?
Yeah, I'm new to Denver and Colorado. This is only my third year teaching at the University of Denver, so I'm really enjoying exploring this community and the people in it. But of course, the colony of New Spain reached well up into what is now the United States. New Mexico and parts of southern Colorado are really part of that heritage. And so even though we don't have a lot of manuscripts from this area of the world, it feels still connected to what was happening in Mexico City.
All right. I want to share one more piece that's on this weekend's concerts by the Baroque Chamber Orchestra of Colorado. Zoe, you picked out this piece for us. What should we listen for?
So you'll hear a repeating bass line pattern, which is sort of like a riff, and an instrumental improvisation over it. And these riffs were really common in this repertory, and they're really fun.
Zoe Weiss is a musicologist who also plays an instrument called the viola da gamba with the Baroque Chamber Orchestra of Colorado. They'll perform 2 concerts this weekend celebrating the music of Sor Juana Ines de la Cruz at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Denver. We'll have more info in our show notes and at KUNC.org. Before we go today, we have a podcast to recommend. Purplish is a show about Colorado politics and what happens at the state capitol. It's co-hosted by KUNC politics reporter Lucas Brady Woods. The Purplish team talks about how local lawmakers tackle issues that affect Coloradans and some of the surprising debates that happen at the state legislature. The coverage is part of the Colorado Capital News Alliance, a collaboration between KUNC and other newsrooms like Rocky Mountain PBS, Colorado Public Radio, and the Colorado Sun. Find Purplish at KUNC.org or wherever you get your podcasts. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.